Hey guys, welcome back to AutoTechNick. Today we're back out continuing the work on the jetboat project because clearly we still have a long ways to go before we're back in the water. But today we're going to be focusing on getting the floors installed and also getting the remaining bulkheads and the rest of the woodwork installed into the boat. So hang tight. So you guys are probably wondering, if we're going to be putting in floor and bulkheads, why am I putting on the engine cover of the boat? And, well, really, that's because luckily all the interior in this boat is probably had 1 or 2 seasons on it. It's extremely new, and I'm not changing anything with the interior. So before I go and start putting in the floor, I'm going to go ahead and get the engine cover on. That's going to tell me where my back seat needs to be, and I'm going to use that to determine where the floor is going to stop and where all my woodwork goes. Let me grab the camera and I'll bring you in real quick. Not going to lie, guys, I've been working on this boat for months and months and months, and now seeing it just with the engine cover and back seat in it, resembling a bit of a boat, reminding me of what it looks like, definitely helps in the motivation department. Really helps me know where I'm headed towards the end, and you know, gives you that extra little boost that you need to plow through the rest of this work. So like I mentioned, I'm using all this engine cover, essentially the position of the back seat, which I'll come back, and the mark that I'm looking for, a reference, is where the back seat meets the stringer back there. Now, if you remember on, I think it was the first or second video of this jet boat, I actually went and pulled all my measurements so I knew where they're at. And I could go off of those measurements to, you know, get what I need right here. Ultimately, I decided the real truth is where the seat sits. I want everything to match. I'll show you how I'm going to configure the floor. First, I need to get my marks on there, and then I need to take all this back off, and we'll dive back into the boat. With the engine cover and the back seat out of the boat, you can see where I marked where I want the floor to be terminated and end. Now, on the floor, I'm going back very similar to how it was before, where I'm only putting a floor in between the stringers. Now, when I took this boat apart, they had a 2x4 that ran down the center, essentially where that blue painter's tape is. It ended with the floor and it was open here in the back. This is where I'm going to start to deviate. I'm going to close that in because I'm going to have everything fiberglassed in, and I want to make it all part of an engine box, and also I want structurally both stringers to be tied to one another. Previously, there was no board that was fiberglassed in between the 2 stringers. There was, I think, 1 board back underneath the back seat and 1 a little further up, and they were just bolted in. So that's the main thing where I'm deviating. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to run a board across in this direction, and I'm going to go ahead and run another 2x4 up as I did last time, and then I'm going to run 1/2 inch plywood over the top of that. Then once the plywood's on, I'll do another board that goes ahead and comes across the back that's flush with the top of the stringers, and then we're going to do some more supports and bulkheads, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the first step of this, we know where we want everything to be, and I'm going to finalize those measurements here in a little bit. But I already went ahead and cut out this board that's going to sit back here in between. So this is already the big difference from last time. This board was not there. I just had the 2x4 running up. And we're going to go ahead and address all water drains later. Right now we're just get everything cut and fit. So this board is sitting here and it's level across the junction of the corner of both stringers. Now this is going to aid me because in order to trim and mark my 2x4, I don't have to shim the back of it up like I did when we found the markings for the stringers. If you recall in that video, I had to prop the back of the stringers up the exact height of the stringer. This is already at the height I need, so that saves me a little trouble there. So my next step is to go ahead and level out my 2x4 on top of this piece and up into the bow and make my cut. However, there's one more thing I want to show you on that 2x4. Okay, here's the 2x4 we're going to use, and if you can look down it, hopefully the camera shows it, it is not straight. It has a big bow in it, and that's going to cause issues when I go to put the floor in. I don't want that bow in it. Now you'll notice I already went and got a line ran down it where I need to cut it to correct it. And that line basically is on both ends. The center won't be cut, so I'm going to cut the tapers off both ends, and it's going to make the top of that board level. which is what I need. Once I have the top of that board level and I set it up in the bow and then set it up on this board that I need, the bottom of the board and that bow doesn't matter. I can go ahead and scribe that board like I did with my stringers, and I'm cutting the bottom off, and the top, I've already adjusted it for being level. Now, I noticed that that board was bowed before I put in the fuel tank, so I was able to use that angle that I have there holding the fuel tanks in to get my marks to get that board straight. So before we proceed, I'm going to go ahead and correct that bow on the top of that board, get it cut, and then we're going to get it mocked up into the boat, and I'll show you how to get it trimmed to match the floor of the boat. Okay, so we went ahead and we cut the top of this 2x4, and now it is straight, so that way I can pull a true level off of it. Now, since the bow curls up in the front, the way to get this level is basically determined by the length. If I move this forward or backwards, and I'm just running my long level on it and making sure it's level. Once I have where it's level, I need to go ahead and mark it so I can cut it. So I'm gonna have to mark it so it matches the floor. Then I'll have to mark it back here so it sits down in front of this piece of wood also. Now, in order to get this cut so it fits the floor, I'm gonna use the exact same method I used to cut this backboard, which is the same thing that I use for the stringers. Like I mentioned, this is set up level. It has the exact height that I need down here. I took that height, which I think was about 3 1/4 inches, and I drilled another hole in the same tool that I used for the stringers at 3 1/4 inches. So when I run this tool along the floor, this pencil mark is gonna make a mark on this board, and it's gonna go ahead and mark essentially the bottom of the board all the way along, and that will be the line that I cut. That's gonna allow this board to fit. When I made this board, I did the exact same thing. I took that board and cut it at a little bit shy of 26 inches to fit in between the stringers. I ran this along the board on the bottom to get it to fit. Once I had it fitting the bottom of the floor, I ran my straight edge and a level across, made sure it was level, marked my line, and cut it to be the height of the top of the floor. So I'm gonna go through, get this line marked up on this board, we're gonna get it cut, and we'll keep trucking forward on this. I was able to go ahead and get that 2x4 cut, and you can see how it fits the bottom of the hole all the way up down the center of the keel. And you can also notice here that it is level, which again, I leveled the boat, the stringers are level, everything's built off that level. This rear board on the back, again, same technique to get it. It's in there and it's leveled. And also off camera, you'll notice that I went ahead and put some drains in there. So I did 2 drains because I have the center board. It's going to allow water on either side that potentially can get in there to go ahead and drain out. Same thing with the stringers. We're going to fiberglass and go ahead and get everything coated and sealed on the inside so I don't have to worry about any water damage. Now, another thing I did is I went ahead and made an additional mark to where this board sits 8 inches back. I did that because I need to go ahead and grind and prep the bottom of the boat, and the marks that I have there for the location of this board are going to be ground off. So this will be the new point that I reference off of to position this board. Next steps, like everything else in this boat, I need to pull the wood out. I need to coat all the edges and bottoms with fiberglass resin, let it soak in, get it nice and sealed up. Then I'm going to go ahead and use that fiber filler putty, bed both of these boards in. We're going to do the same thing that we did with the bulkheads for the fuel tanks and the tabbing. Going to use some of the 8-inch wide 1708 and the 4-inch wide. We'll tab those in. Once I have these installed, tabbed in, I'll bring you guys back and show you some stuff with the floor. All right, guys, it's the next day. Our fiberglass is cured up, and we have the center board bedded into the boat and tabbed in with the fiberglass. Now, I originally planned on using some of the 8-inch wide 1708 that I had to make my first layer to tab this in, and then I was going to go back over it with a 4-inch. Once I had this board in and made some measurements, this board is 3 inches tall at the tallest point, and really that was just too much fiberglass to use the 8-inch wide. It really would have been 5 inches on the floor of the boat, and it was just going to be an excessive amount of fiberglass and resin. I contemplated taking my 8-inch piece and cutting it down and making it 6 inches, which would have been ideal, but with the quantity that I have left of the 8-inch 1708 and the bulkhead and remaining work I need to do, I didn't want to get into that, so I just chose to go buy some more 6-inch 1708. So the first layer here on the stringer is the 6-inch 1708, and then I backed it up with 1 layer of the 4-inch 1708 and glassed it in the entire length. Now, luckily, this board was short enough where I could do it in one run. I didn't have to do sections like I did on the stringers. And you may notice that I left the top of it raw, again, unlike the stringers. So I did not have to router the edges and roll them over. And you can see here where I left the fiberglass just loose, and also the same thing at the top where it kind of bevels in and ties into the bow. So there's a couple ways I can address this. Just need to cut this off essentially. Now the reason why is because I'm going to be setting the floor directly on top of this wood, so I didn't need the fiberglass to roll over, and that's why I also didn't need that nice bull nose. So you can use any tool that you want to cut this, you know, hacksaw, sawzall, jigsaw, really a cutoff wheel, and grind it off if you want. For me, I'm going to use my air saw just simply because of the size of this. It'll be easy to control and maneuver. I just need to take this saw, run it along the top of this, and cut this excess glass off of these 2x4s. Also, when I tabbed this in, I did the same thing I did on the stringers with the water drains. I went right over them. So I need to come back, drill those out, grind them out, bevel them, and address them now, and get all this cleaned up so that way once the floor goes on, everything's in order. I'll be real with you guys. The absolute worst part of this entire project is dust control and dust. It seems like no matter what step I'm on, I'm creating some sort of dust, whether it be fiberglass or sawdust. And yeah, I put the plastic up and that really helped, and I was really getting after it. But even just like this, cleaning up the board and those small holes creates more dust. I can't tell you how many times I've vacuumed out this boat, but I'd rather do that and go through it, make sure everything's clean and done right, and it is what it is. I can't do much about it. Now, the real painful part of this is once I'm done with this boat project, the next thing that I'm going to be working on is this E28 M5, and sadly, I'm taking it down the bare metal and repainting it, so I think I'm going to be trading fiberglass dust for Bondo dust. Now back to the boat. We got that board cleaned up, I got the drains addressed, and well, I had a mental plan of how I was going to execute this floor on the boat and also the end result. And I've kind of went ahead and test fit some wood, and I realized that how I'm going to execute it differs from the end result that I've already planned out. And it's really not a big deal. It's going to take just a few more steps to get it the way I thought it was going to be, and I'm going to have a slightly different product. Now, the reason why this happened is I had the method that I came up with on leveling this board and getting everything set up, and my brain was assuming that I would end up with the same result as the people that put the floor in before me, and they did things very differently than I did, and I did not notice it until now. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some materials to show you what I'm talking about and how we're going to work around them. All right, I think the best way to cover this is outline how the floor used to be in the boat. Now the floor ended about here. It went stringer to stringer and ran probably 2 feet shy of the end of the stringers, and probably within 2 feet of that started to deviate from the stringers and curve in and kind of follow the shape of the bow. Now, I was anticipating to install the floor the same way, with the exception that yes, I moved the stringers from 24 inches apart to 26 inches apart. So I knew that the floor would just be a little bit wider, but I was expecting the same result. I went about getting the center board cut and fit the same way I did the stringers, which was basically baselining this to a level that's level with the keel. So right now, the floor of the boat, or the keel, is leveled. This top of the board is level. Same with the stringers. Everything was leveled. Well, where this ended up deviating is the people that installed the floor before me did not do that. I didn't catch it and realize it, and that's why I'm going to end up with a different result than I expected. Again, not a huge deal. It's just going to take a few extra steps to get the floor cut, and it's going to be a slight bit different than I had already mentally pictured. And I think for me, that's going to be the biggest hurdle. I just have to accept that it's not going to be what I expected. So, easiest way to cover this is at the back. This board that I made was exactly as I expected with the old floor. It's going to be able to run from stringer to stringer, and it's level. So I can set my 1/2-inch plywood across this from stringer to stringer and have a floor, and well, again, same thing. This deviates further up towards the bow of the boat. So if I slide back here some, and I'll set the level in place. Now mind you, this level is 24 inches and not 26, so it's kind of making the problem look not as bad as it actually is, but you can start to see that as I start moving forward in the boat, I right now have about a 1/4 inch underneath this level to this bottom board. And it's actually going to be worse if I were to move this level up to where the edge of the stringers were. What this means is the floor that used to be in the boat was not level and actually ran uphill into the bow. Now, I don't see any difference on how you do the floor. One's going to be easier to install and cut and trim. If I were to ran the floor up on this line with the stringers, it would have taken more time for me to cut and trim this board to have the same rise with the stringers as it goes up into the bow. So I'm going to have to trim my wood to slowly taper it in as I go forward, so that way it slides down in this V enough to sit on top of this board. Now I did realize this before I put the board in, and I could have went and got another board, cut it, and put the floor back in that way, but for me it wasn't worth it. I already had my wood in the center, rough cut to 26 inches. I already had this board, and I can just trim them to make them fit. And the only extra positive I can think of this is it's going to give me up about here underneath the bow, probably an extra inch or two of height. And it was pretty tight previously. Once there's a floor in there to crawl around and grab our skis and tube and stuff while we're out in the water. So maybe I'm just going to convince myself that all this extra work to gain that extra inch is going to make life a lot better. So now we have this extra step to get the wood to fit, and I gave it some thought on what's going to be the best way to get this wood cut and fit so it's nice and tight. There's one thing to keep in mind. I'm running 1/2 inch plywood for the floor, and I'm going to have it have this bevel on the bottom side of the cut, so that way the top of the wood is nice and flush, because this is where we walk and spend all of our time. The best way I can think to overcome this is I'm probably going to put some painter's tape out here where the board is going to end up sitting. And I'm going to either take something that spans the distance and make sure it's level and run it up and mark it, or I can just do one side at a time with like this level, and I can move it till I have a nice level line, and I can make my marks to where the wood's going to end, and I can work all my way up. And then I'm going to have to do that with one measurement with it resting directly on top of this 2x4, which would be the bottom of the wood. And then I probably am going to space this up 1/2 inch on this 2x4, and that would be the top of the wood. It's going to be time consuming and tedious. It's going to take more time to cut the floor. It's not the floor that I expected. It's going to look a little different up towards the bow. It's going to give us more space. Plans change. It's not a big deal. We just have to adapt, overcome, have a new solution for it. So I'm going to go ahead and work on getting this measured and get the wood cut. I'll bring you guys back. I'll let you know if it worked like I thought, or if I ended up coming up with a better method. For you guys that are watching, if you have a method or a better way of getting this cut and trimmed, jump in the comments, let me know. Let me know if I did it the hard way, if there's an easier way, if there's a trick. If I'm crazy, I want to hear it. So let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, so the hardest part about getting this floor cut and fit is going to be up in the bow, because it has the most significant taper both inward and also to match the slope of the bottom of the boat. So you can see that I already have everything marked out here on this board, and you can see that I have a center line ran and also some marks ran every 2 inches. I use those in order to get these marks here on the outside so I know where to cut. Let's go ahead and jump in the boat real quick, and I'll show you how I got those marks or measurements. So the first thing I did is I just went in here, I took my level, and I leveled it off of the center board where the floor will sit, and I basically moved it in or out to get it level. As you can see, there's a slope to the boat, and that changes my level. Once I had it leveled, I just went ahead and made a mark on the outside edge, and I did that every couple inches. Now, since I have this level sitting directly on the wood, this is going to represent the bottom of the floor of the boat. In order to get the same measurement for the top, I spaced it off with this piece of 1/2 inch plywood and did the same method, and that will represent the top of the floor. Again, making marks every couple inches. I took my Sharpie, connected all the dots, and I had all my marks. And you can see that I have that ran all the way up into the bow. Then I went ahead and down the center board, starting up in the bow, went ahead and made these marks every 2 inches, and you can see that I went ahead and assigned them numbers. I did that so I could pull a measurement from the width of the outside line and also a measurement on the width of the inside line, and have those measurements corresponding to those numbers. Once I went through and grabbed all those numbers, I went ahead and jotted them down on the paper. And you can see I have my initial measurements here for the inside measurement and the outside measurement. So that would be the bottom of the wood and that would be the top of the wood. Divided everything in half. So then, since I had the half measurements, I ran the center point down my board and I just did my half measurements out for each row corresponding, and again, connecting the dots. And that gave me the shape of the floor that I need. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out. I'm gonna cut out only the outside with my skill saw, 90 degrees to the wood. Mind you, this is the bottom of the floor of the boat. So this will be facing the bottom of the boat. Once I have this cut out with the outside edge, I'm going to take my grinder and I'm gonna grind from the outside edge up to the inside edge, and that's gonna give me my bevel. I don't wanna remove any material from the outside edge, and I don't wanna remove anything past this line. So if I just bevel that all the way down, that's gonna give me the shape to match the slant of the floor of the boat. That should allow it to sit flush on the fiberglass of the boat, while the center will be sitting flush onto the wood that we went ahead and had cut. So you can see I finished the bevel and got that ran all the way down, and we're sitting up here in the boat. So let's go ahead and slide this up and in and see how well it fits. So should be able to kind of reference the marks that I had, and it fits really well. So you can see that I'm sitting flush on the wood back here, and you can see that it fits. Get this position right. The marks and tape are lined up really good, and it's going to have a lot of surface area to go ahead and bond this onto the boat. And we'll check all the way at the front. Fits nice. Now, I stopped it short up here. I'm not fully decided what I'm going to do, if I'm going to seal this all the way off or if I'm going to leave a channel for if any water gets up here where it can drain down and along the side of that center board that I built and out the drains at the rear, or if I'm just going to go ahead and seal this off completely. I'm not fully decided on that yet. The old floor that was up here was actually cut off a couple inches early, so I might do something similar. I'm going to sit and stew on that for a little bit. I did look back at some of my old pictures and video, and when I pulled that old board out, it did have some water damage up here, but also where the eyelet hook on the bow was pretty loose, and that was letting a lot of water in, and I'm correcting that as well. So there shouldn't be any water up here, but I like to plan ahead and have a worst case scenario and a plan for that, so undetermined. Now, one thing to mention, I started with the wood in the bow. Because of the severe taper that it has, I have a little bit of flexibility with the depth where I position it, and that's going to adjust how well it fits. So I have a little bit of freedom there, and the rest of the wood's pretty square, so I could go ahead and get that set in place, and that will dictate the length and the positioning of the rest of the wood. Now, one thing I want to show you also is I have this leftover piece of wood here, and we'll slide this up and in. And when I was talking earlier in the video about the difference of the floor, the original floor of the boat ran from stringer to stringer all the way up to about 2 feet of the bow and was not level. It kind of rose up with the stringers as they went up into the boat. And that's where I wasn't really anticipating that. Now this board's sitting how the old floor used to be, and if we look in here, we can see the difference. So that's really the height difference that I have. And after going through and doing the work and marking that board to get it to fit the bow, I would have had to do the same thing if I would have ran the floor this way. It just wouldn't have as much as of a taper. In the end, I don't think it was really that much more time consuming to put the floor in this way versus running the board level with the stringers like this, because the time I spent marking the center of that bow, I would have saved a little bit if I ran the wood this way, but I would have spent more time getting the height of this to match the wood. So it's really pick your poison. Which one do you want? I don't think there's a big difference. Really, like I said, the biggest part about this was it's not what I expected, and I had to change my plan midway through. Not a big deal. Everything's working out just fine. So at this point, I just need to go ahead and jump on that other piece of wood, get all my marks like I did on the front part of the bow. So mark my center line, mark my 2-inch marks, transfer my measurements, make the cut, bevel the edges, and then we're going to go ahead and have the floor mocked up. Success! We almost have a completed floor in the boat now. I finished up trimming and cutting and beveling the rear board. I trimmed it at the rear. I ended up trimming it a little bit at the front to get the fit that I wanted nicely, and also to get it to line up with the front board that we made earlier. I did end up trimming about 2 inches off that front board to kind of make the two boards fit well to each other. And I also did end up cutting the very front of the front board off for water drains. Now, I've been able to make sure that both boards are level on both planes, and we're pretty much set, ready to get these started bedding these into the boat. So before I go ahead and bed these in, I need to pop them back out. I have to finish prepping the hole. I need to go ahead and fiberglass the bottom of these boards, so if any water gets to them, it doesn't soak in. And then we'll go ahead and get our fiber filler on, get them set in place, and once that cures, just like everything else, we'll get nice round corners of the fiber filler on the edges, and we're going to go ahead and fiberglass them back in with the 1708. Once I have this glassed in with the 1708 and it's dried, we'll crawl back in the bow. I'm going to show you the finished product with where I cut the front and it has the water drains, and we're going to go ahead and address what we're going to do here on the back. Last night, I was able to finish up the fiberglass work. I got the floor installed, fiberglassed in, and I have it tabbed in. So I went ahead and I tabbed it in with 2 layers on each side. Again, I ran the 8-inch wide 1708 all the way down the length, and then I backed it with a 4-inch wide. So I ran them down the middle, right in the corner, so I have a 4-inch overlap on the bottom layer and a 2-inch overlap both on the floor and on the stringer. Now on the floor of the boat, you can see I went over it with some vinyl ester resin, and that's just to seal it up so that way if any water gets on it through the carpet, it won't get into the wood and rot it out. Now I did promise that I'm going to show you guys the front of the floor where I cut it and how I have allowed for the water to drain if any water gets up there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get myself up in the bow. I'll bring it back and I'll show you what I did up there.
Not much working space up here. I think you guys can clearly see that. A little tight. But hey, at least I got an extra 2 inches of space in the floor now.
Alright guys, so here you can see where I ended the floor of the boat, and it's quite a bit early from where I even have the center board. Now I determined on how far to cut this back, and that was based on how much of a gap I had up here for the water to drain. So my thinking was if any water were to get up here, I want it to drain on the floor of the fiberglass and try to keep it off the wood as much as possible. And that's really my philosophy through all the water drains that I've done on the boat. I want to keep the water off of the wood. So I had to keep trimming this floor back in order to open up this opening enough for the water to go in. So slide up here and see, I cut it back and I have down in this bottom gap, maybe an inch, 3/4 of an inch. So if any water gets up here, I'm hoping that it's going to go ahead and run down this, and I'll run all the way down that 2x4 to the bottom where I have the holes, and it can drain out. Now, keep in mind that this boat's sitting level, but when it's in the water, the back end sags quite a bit. So all the water is going to want to run to the back of the boat. So I just need to give it a path to get back there so my bilge pumps can pump it out. You can see that I added some fiber filler here on the corners, and I also have some fiberglass that's overhanging. I'm going to go back and clean these up. I'll sand this, make it smoother. I'm going to sand this fiber filler so it has this nice, good, smooth transition, and the same thing up here. Then I'm going to come back and make sure I have plenty of fiberglass over the wood here, these edges, and all the transitions, so that way if any water does get up here, it won't soak into the wood. I'll make sure it's all sealed up.
Now, I'm going to wait to do all that because my whole bulkhead situation. I don't know where the bulkheads are going to be up here in the bow. I haven't decided, so with all my fiberglass work, I'm getting all the structural stuff in. Once I have all the structural parts in, I'm going to come back and clean it up, finalize all my water drains, and make everything nice and pretty.
You guys may have picked up a trend. When I did the stringers and did the water drains, I just roughed them in and then left them and said I was going to come back to them. Same things for the bulkheads, for the fuel tanks. I roughed them in, said I'll come back and finalize them, even back here on these water drains and also in the front. Now the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm trying to go ahead and get all the structure of the boat done now, and then I'll come back and make things look nice or finalize everything and make sure it's sealed up. I'm going about it that way because in some areas I'll have to regrind the fiberglass that I've already put on and prep it for more fiberglass, and additional layers will be added up onto things. So I want to see where everything lies and what it looks like and what my finished product is once the structure of the boat is all done and everything's installed. Then I'm going to come back and on the areas that need the extra attention to be cleaned up and made to look nice, I'll go ahead and address those. And the other areas, say, more towards the front where they're covered by carpet, I'll just go ahead and get them prepped for the carpet. And obviously then I'll have all of my water drains finalized and make sure everything's good and watertight. Now another thing that I did not mention in this video, just like the stringers, I chose to use clear vertical grain Douglas fir for the 2x4s holding the floor in, and the floor is actually made out of 1/2-inch marine grade plywood. Now the floor in the boat previously that I pulled out was 3/4 inch plywood. Now I felt that 3/4 inch plywood was overkill and that I'd be fine jumping it down to 1/2 inch. That way I can save a little bit of weight in the boat. And honestly, I actually had 3/8 plywood in the truck ready to take from the lumber yard, and I backed out the last second because I thought it was going to be too flimsy and not strong enough to support the floor. Well, once I got this 1/2 inch and ripped it at 26 inches and did a test fit in between the stringers, without the 2x4 in between, it held me up just fine. With the 2x4 and the way everything's installed now, it's rock solid. So if one was really conscious on weight and wanted to trim some weight out of the boat, save a few pounds, absolutely the 3/4 inch is going to be just fine with the short span that you're running here. Now that we have the floor in the boat, it's time to go ahead and dress the bulkheads and the last of the lateral supports. I also need to make a battery mount and a mount for my place diverter. Now unfortunately, I placed all this in last night and the fiberglass is still a little tacky, so I can't crawl in there and take care of those tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and make those on a new video. Keep an eye on the channel. It'll be coming here shortly. Remember guys, jump in the comments. Let me know how you would have measured and cut the front section of the floor. Let me know if there's an easier way. If you enjoyed the video, appreciate it. If you went ahead and hit the like button, give me a comment, share it with your buddy. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching the video. We'll see you on the next one.